So, Michael, we've been asked to do a bit of an update on the Andrew Tate case because we did a video on it or a podcast on it some time ago. But this is a very serious topic. So I think before we talk about sort of what the update is and how different, frankly, cases proceed in countries like Romania and even the UK compared to Canada, we should frame this a little bit with what domestic laws are in Canada with respect to human trafficking, just how serious of an offense and how prevalent it is. And then there's the United Nations office that has done a global report on trafficking, and just sort of frame it, then we can talk a little bit about what the case is or where it's heading.
Right. So, as you said, our government treats human trafficking very seriously. There's no secret there, and there's some significant offenses in our criminal code with very serious penalties. Sorry,
as it should be. If somebody's convicted of this beyond a reasonable doubt in a fair trial,
it's human slavery. Basically,
it's human slavery.
Right. Yeah. So basically 6 offenses in our criminal code. I'll just go through them briefly, not in any great detail. Obviously, the first, the umbrella offense is trafficking in persons. That's section 279.01 of the code. Maximum penalty of life imprisonment and not surprisingly, minimum penalty of 5 years where it involves kidnapping, aggravated assault, aggravated sexual assault, and a maximum of 14 years, a mandatory minimum of 4 years in all other cases. So that's the first global offense. Then it drills down. Then we have trafficking of a person under the age of 18 years. And again, things get a bit more serious in terms of penalties. More serious because of the age involved. Then there is receiving a financial or other material benefit for the purpose of committing or facilitating trafficking in persons. So I think that addresses more people who are associated with it, who help facilitate it. And then again, they distinguish with the age again, receiving a financial or other material benefit for the purpose of committing or facilitating trafficking again, but with a child victim. Maximum penalty of 14 years, minimum of 2 years. And then the last 2 deal with, I didn't know about this one, travel documents, for example, withholding or destroying a person's identity documents for the purpose of committing or facilitating trafficking of that person. Again, adult victim and then child victim. So those are the 6 top offenses. There's also immigration law offenses. The Immigration Act has a specific section 118, and that reads that the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act prohibits knowingly organizing the coming into Canada of one or more persons by means of abduction, fraud, deception, use of threat or force or coercion. Maximum penalty, life imprisonment, $1 million fine. So all of these sections treated very seriously.
Yeah, and in Canada, the trafficking sections have been used to prosecute crimes involving sex trafficking, but also used for labor trafficking.
Right.
So that is people who are coming into the country on visas to do work, may be brought in under false pretenses, working for an individual, not being paid properly, housed inappropriately, their travel documents being seized, and these legislative sections under the criminal code can be used to prosecute in labor trafficking as well, and that's something that is quite serious and is prosecuted. We've had cases.
We've had a few of those. Not a lot of people know about that, but it happens.
And there's of course an overflow with the domestic legislation on sex trafficking with prostitution laws. There's obviously a flow and a connection to that. And we've had cases where we've had clients found not guilty of human trafficking related offenses where they have been, frankly, falsely accused. They could have had, in particular, there's a couple of cases where we've had I had one person who was doing a favor for a friend who thought it was a girlfriend of his friend. Sure enough, she wound up brought into Toronto for sexual services, and he was basically like her chauffeur
Right.
for a couple of days, and then they had a particular issue. And when the police were conducting an overall investigation into, unbeknownst to him, trafficking, he was arrested and charged, and the complainant, due to other reasons, which I won't talk about right now, made false allegations against him involving him in the overall scheme. He was acquitted. And another one where a guy was dating a girl and was simply just helping, but when they had a nasty breakup, was wound up being charged, and was charged not just with sexual assault, but with human trafficking related offenses, acquitted. But it's ripe for abuse, just like any other section.
Right.
But it's real, and the human trafficking is a very prevalent and very damaging type of offense. And as noted in the
United Nations document.
United Nations, there's many forms of human trafficking, and they specifically state that this is described as a form of enslavement. It's exploitation of people, and they don't mince words. It's enslavement.
It's modern day slavery.
Part of what they were trying to get across in their report was that a number of countries have taken steps to implement international agreements with respect to human trafficking. There's a UN protocol against trafficking in persons, but there are many countries, particularly in Africa and other places, that lack the necessary legal instruments to deal with this. Second, conviction rates in various jurisdictions are going up, simply because of the use of the laws and the knowledge of what's going on. So policing of this is going up. Third, sexual exploitation is by far the most commonly identified form of human trafficking, about 79%, followed by forced labor, which is what I was talking about, 18%. Although they suggest this may be some sort of statistical bias, by and large, the exploitation of women tends to be the most visible in city centers and other locations. So you may have a particular bias that's identified far more than labor trafficking. And sexual exploitation is far more frequently reported and therefore more documented. And that's why you may see the larger discrepancy in the percentages. They also note a disproportionate number of women are involved in human trafficking, not only as victims, but also as traffickers.
Yeah, that was a surprising stat.
Not really.
No?
So, we've had some cases where females are involved in recruiting and in the full operations.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so female offenders have a far more prominent role in present-day slavery than in most other forms of crime.
Interesting.
This fact needs to be addressed, especially the cases where former victims have become perpetrators. And one can imagine where a former victim may find themselves within this environment and milieu and therefore engage in the human trafficking to maybe get out of their present situation. But there are cases involving females recruiting and then the ones engaging in the operation and management of the entire scheme. So that's a fairly significant fact. Most trafficking in national or regional environments are carried out by people whose nationality is the same as that of the victims, which is interesting.
Didn't know that.
Yeah, so there are notable cases of long-distance trafficking, but Europe is the destination for victims for the widest range of origins, while victims from Asia are trafficked to the widest range of destinations as well. The Americas are prominent both as an origin and destination for victims in the human trafficking trade. So it's serious when we discuss this topic, and we give this update on the Tate case, where we're not, again, rendering any opinion one way or the other on the veracity of allegations, but it's serious. And the prevalence of this is growing, and this is not something we normally talk about on the podcast, but we've had a number of inquiries about the podcast we did. I think it's well over a year ago, year and a half ago or so, on Andrew Tate. And I think I expressed some concerns about his overall persona as an online influencer, certainly not helping his situation.
No, it's not.
In defending himself, because there are a number of videos, interviews, podcasts, etc., out there where he expresses certain views that one can say is related to a particular misogynistic perspective, and denigrating views with respect to women, which again doesn't help his situation, and I think contributes to overall discriminatory beliefs against women. So it's not a good situation, but where are we with this case now?
Well, as recently as this past Saturday, the brothers flew back to Romania. Nothing controversial about that. They were required to fly back to sign some ongoing court documents, I think at the request of the prosecution.
Yeah, and I think we should say, because when we last did this, they were in the midst of a number, and the Romanian law is like, so the civil system in Europe is very different than what we experience in North America and the UK, and the Romanian law particularly was different. So they were through various phases they were in custody for a while.
Travel ban for a while.
Well, they were in custody.
Yeah,
and then finally they got house arrest with some exceptions, and then that has been loosened up significantly. They were able to travel to Florida.
Yeah, they went back to Florida, but as I said, they've gone back this past weekend just to sign some further documents. I'm not sure what, a lot of the Romanian stuff is not clear, or it's obviously foreign to us, but it seems like the original charges went to a higher court. A higher court reviewed the indictment and basically told the prosecution, you haven't got enough. So it's kind of in that murky territory of, I'm assuming they're reassessing the strength of their case potentially. But there's no new charges.
There's an investigation in the UK, an extradition, but in Romania...
Or in Romania, status quo.
Back in June of 2023, prosecutors in Romania who accused the Tate brothers filed an indictment.
Right.
And basically that was, along with two Romanian women who were charged, of forming an organized criminal group in 2021.
Right.
And trafficking women across Romania, Britain, and the United States. And of course, the Tate brothers vigorously have been defending themselves. They've said they're innocent. And recently, on an appeal, they were able to block the case going to trial. And what ultimately happened, and we don't have enough information on this, was that, as you said, the indictment was reviewed by a superior appeal court. It was sent back for a number of reasons, of which is unclear to me, for the prosecutors to review the indictment. Doesn't mean they can't proceed with a trial at some point, but it has not gone ahead. Right. And as a result of that, they are on a bail, meaning like a person in Canada would have bail and they're able to travel, but they have to continue to appear before a Romanian court to check in as terms of their release, and of course sign documents and provide other information if they're doing it. And a number of details of the charges are of course confidential.
Some have come out.
Some have come out, but confidential for purposes in order to keep a fair trial.
Right.
But one of the charges were included, as we discussed before, a sexual assault allegation. And just as a recap, the investigators identified 7 women who said that the brothers had misled them into believing they wanted a relationship with them, and they were instead housed in a compound near Bucharest and forced to appear in pornographic videos which were shared online. So it was actually as recently in December of last year that the appeals court ruled that the indictment did not meet the requirements for the case to move to trial and sent it back to prosecutors. I have to be honest, it's not something we can comment on. No clue what that means. Our indictments in Canada are pretty straightforward. They lay out the charges in a basic allegation, and then everything else is proffered through the Crown's case. In the United States, there will be a much more detailed indictment. You've seen this in many instances, most popular previous to President Trump being reelected. Sorry about that. I'm going back in time.
You are.
I was helping a child with university history. President Trump being reelected, there were the indictments that were lodged against him, and of course it's reviewed in excruciating detail in the media, just like indictments in other cases, and they contain very specific allegations with evidence. That we don't have in Canada. I'm not familiar with what the indictments are in Romania, but it was sent back to prosecutors. In August of 2024, Romanian authorities searched one of the Tate residences as part of a new investigation. A spokeswoman for the brothers advised the media that this had taken place. Those accusations include, again, human trafficking, money laundering. Romanian prosecutors confirmed that they had issued warrants in Bucharest for potential trafficking of minors and a sexual intercourse allegation with a minor. So not only are there the pre-existing allegations, there's this new allegation. But
doesn't stop there.
Why don't you talk about Great Britain?
Well, yeah.
I need a little bit more coffee.
I know. Well, the Tates have always talked about, avoiding the States, avoiding the UK, because that's where men get prosecuted. A lot of the things they're
not completely wrong with that. Because we often talk about how easy it is to file an allegation in Canada, the United States, or the UK.
Exactly. Well, lo and behold, there was a new European arrest warrant issued by the British authorities, and again, accusations related to the arrests that were made between 2012 and 2015, including, haven't heard of this one before, allegations of sexual aggression.
Yeah.
Interesting. Haven't heard that charge.
I love Canada.
Yeah.
When it comes to our criminal code, and sir, I say this all the time. We should be very proud of our system of justice in Canada, including our criminal code and our criminal justice. It's properly laid out. It's understandable.
Yeah.
Some terms might be a bit broad. Things, of course, need to be worked on. But God, when you compare it to other jurisdictions.
Yeah, sexual aggression, question mark.
Anyways, go
in
ahead.
any event, Crown Prosecution Service in Britain decided not to pursue these charges. There wasn't enough evidence to meet whatever their legal
in
test
prior
is.
years.
In prior years, yeah. And apparently now police in Bedfordshire are working with authorities in Romania on a new British investigation into allegations of rape and human trafficking. They had obtained a European arrest warrant for two men in their 30s, they said. Also on the civil side, 4 British women have sued Andrew Tate, claiming that he raped and abused them. So their troubles are going to go away.
So let's just go back. So there are new charges in Great Britain.
Right.
And a European arrest warrant was obtained, and I believe the court in Romania has acceded to the fact that they can be extradited on those charges, and that would be in keeping with international law amongst EU countries.
Right.
We have same bilateral agreements and extradition treaties with other countries as well. So, unfortunately, it's something that's going to take a while to wind its way through the system, but they'll be having to appear in a UK court to speak to these allegations,
As well as civil allegations.
So talk about. There's not a lot of detail about the lawsuits, but again, these are important too, because it's not as common in Canada to have civil lawsuits like it is in the United States and other jurisdictions. Although
it's coming here.
It's become a cottage industry now. You'll see a lot of personal injury firms here, basically advertising to represent victims of sexual abuse. Right. And commencing action. So it's here.
It's here. I've seen the 1-800 hotlines that have been set up.
So it's growing, but it hasn't been as prevalent. And again, the award of damages in Canada is not nearly the same as it is in the United States. But it's a growing industry here. And I don't mean that in a negative way.
No.
Again, I always have these concerns, and I'm very clear about this. If there is an allegation of sexual abuse, you go to the police.
Right.
Because if it's a genuine, provable, beyond a reasonable doubt allegation, that's something that should be investigated and prosecuted. And those who would be found guilty beyond a reasonable doubt on a fair trial should be dealt with under the criminal justice system. If you want to bring a lawsuit after that, knock yourself out. I just don't like this being litigated civilly first, but of course, there may be reasons behind why somebody prefers that than another one,
Well,
but I'm not going to get into it.
lower test, right? Balance
Balance
of
of probability
probabilities, and don't forget on a
and
previous
money. I like money more.
And in previous episodes, we've discussed this. It's showing up in family court as a form of relief, the psychological damages and the physical damages.
Yeah,
Remember
although
that?
the court did, you don't have the separate tort, but it's now rolled in, and
It's rolled in.
You do see it.
It's coming into
coming
family
out.
law, yeah.
No, it's in.
It's,
But anyway,
yeah.
so these gentlemen are now facing civil action as well. And
As well as in the States. They got problems in the States, remember?
talk about that.
Well, they've sued several people in Florida for defamation, apparently including 2 women who gave evidence against them to the Romanian authorities. So there's a bunch of civil lawsuits now unwinding themselves in the States. So they're going to be busy in an assortment of legal systems for the next foreseeable future.
There's a long history with Andrew Tate, and he did quite an interesting rise in. No, I have to say, I mean,
He's marketed himself very well.
Born in the United States. I believe he was in the military service, and then got in
kickboxer
at some point. Got into combat sports, and did rather well. And at the same time, began his online career, eventually becoming quite a successful influencer. He has webcams and other programs, some of which I think are quite questionable and concerning, frankly. And he has been known to state on social media really inflammatory statements, often one could argue is in support of violence against women, and has been found in violation of various platform policies.
He got booted off of Twitter for a while there.
Yeah, and then reinstated by Elon Musk on X. That in the United States, there's an absolutism with respect to freedom of speech, different than we feel in Canada and other jurisdictions. And Europe has always been much more circumscribed in what freedom of speech actually means. And again, we're not rendering opinions on this, but there has been a steady flow. I mean, there's videos that we've watched, just so that we're properly informed, where, you can say, it's a form of, and it's a form of expression that has unfortunately given rise to the arguments of others about toxic masculinity and misogyny. And one can argue that these comments, these public comments, fit within those categories. And I felt the toxic masculinity argument has gone way too far, to the point of emasculation of men, and I'm quite critical of that. But
he takes it next level, though.
But unfortunately, there is, it's been to another level. But he's a very, he's not a dumb guy. I think he was a sergeant in U.S. Air Force, a chess international master. He's an accomplished individual at such a young age. But unfortunately, this is how he decided to make his money. And they've got a lot of battles ahead of themselves. And so one thing we can't offer, and we got a fair amount of interest in discussing this by way of an update. There's not a lot we can offer about the evidence. There's not a lot that's out there specifically about the evidence, and we won't know more until this goes to a trial, if it goes to a trial in Romania, if it goes to a trial in the UK, or if any of the civil trials wind up going ahead. And we do not, and he and his brother has the absolute right of a presumption of innocence and the right to defend themselves, as we do with any of our clients.
Right.
And allegations may not be true.
Right.
In spite of his rhetoric in media, you sometimes have to separate what is the public online persona to make a living versus what you really do in private life in other realms. So we'll see. I think it's something interesting to watch for a number of reasons. And I think it's done one thing in favor of highlighting internationally the pervasive and very insidious nature of human trafficking, and why countries and international agreements are necessary to pursue this type of thing. But we'll see. It's an interesting. These are interesting high public figures where we will see what the evidence says, and they're certainly going to talk about it, I'm sure.
No doubt.
And I just want to say this, and this is, I want to be careful about this. We are fortunate enough to have clients who come to us where we have a fairly good basis to understand and marshal an argument that our clients are wrongfully accused. And we've had human trafficking allegations, as I spoke to at the beginning. It's important not to taint. It's important to remain objective and maintain a impartial view throughout a process of investigation and its litigation until there is actually a trial and it comes to fruition, because we do not want to create, through any type of bad media or inappropriate media
or stereotypes,
because there are people who do get wrongfully accused of this, and then there are people who are rightfully accused of this. And it's extremely important to maintain an objective, impartial view, both by authorities, police, investigators, and courts, and then about the public, and wait and gather information. Right. And a little bit of the material we've gone through actually was quite good in the sense that it collated information in a chronological format without expressing one opinion either way. So that's good. I think it's important to keep watching this. We'll watch it. There seems to be some interest. And, we'll see how these individuals will continue to represent themselves in
I was going to say that'll be important sphere. Too. See how they portray themselves.
I mean, if I was counsel, I'd be saying,
muzzle them.
No, dial it back and careful about what's said, because it can be misconstrued, and frankly, if there are clear views that align with any type of inappropriate or violent violence against women, that's just not a good thing. So I'm trying to be as neutral and objective here as possible. We're going to follow it. I think it's interesting. I love international law. I used to do a lot of extradition work when I was younger in my career. I don't do as much of it now, but we'll see this play out.
Yeah.
And it's a very serious offense. Let's see what happens.
It's a take no prisoners offense in terms of prosecution. There's dedicated Crown's units dealing with these cases. So
talk about that for a second. In like we have guns and gangs to deal with organized crime.
Right. I'm finding
there's human trafficking units, and they do a great job.
They do a great job, and they're very serious about these allegations and these prosecutions. Like as they should. I've got one coming up, and there's no deals being offered. There's no This is a take no prisoners type of prosecution, and I get it. Right? They're serious.
Where I draw a line in Canada, and where I have the problem is this holier than now approach with respect to prostitution.
Right.
And we had a case about 3-4 years ago where somebody was accused of human trafficking, and she was herself a service provider and was aligned with several other women. Yeah, she was an operator, really just helping out people who all wanted to do the work, and nobody
was forced.
Right. Nobody was exploited. And our client made money, but under the law,
right. She was trafficking, allegedly.
She was certainly afoul of the laws, but I still think our courts are going to have to grapple one day again. And Alan Young, who sadly passed away recently, just a brilliant professor, a brilliant lawyer,
and a nice guy.
Wonderful guy. Was my professor mentor when I was in law school, and had done extremely excellent work on challenging the
Cannabis provisions.
cannabis provision, but also the common body house and the prostitution laws, went all the way up to Supreme Court again. A brilliant litigation resulted in even more stringent provisions by the conservative government at the time. I think this still needs to be revisited.
It does, because it's not absolutely clear on every fact situation.
Well, it's not just that. I think it's a holier than now approach,
Right.
which is not in line with, frankly,
Reality.
what reality is and what the social norms are on this.
Right.
I just think it needs to be looked at more carefully.
A lot of our sex-related offenses need to be looked at.
Okay, well, you don't have a
Okay.
cup, so I'll just give you a props. And what watch are you wearing today?
Today is
Oh, you know what? We're getting to the end, but we should really say something very, very important. I'm
Yes.
sorry about this, but because it's at the end, it doesn't mean it's not important.
That's right.
We have a sponsor.
This is so exciting. It's not Kellogg's or anything like that, though, but that's okay.
Well, it's not Rolex.
No, it's not. It's not Omega.
not Omega.
No.
Not that that would be important, but we have a sponsor, and we're very grateful. So this episode is sponsored by EasyDNS. EasyDNS is a domain name, registrar, and host that has a 30-year track record in the domain and web hosting industry. You're a client, aren't you?
I'm an actual client, a satisfied, happy customer for over a decade.
Whether it is because of cancel culture, platforming attacks, or nefarious actors online, move your domain and web posting over to EasyDNS, one of the most secure web hosting services, and help support Not on Record in the process. All you have to do is go to easydns.com/not on record, or when you sign up at EasyDNS, use the promo code Not on Record, all caps, at checkout. Thank you, EasyDNS, for your support for Not on Record. And now back to the end of our podcast.
Back to our regular programming.
But you know, I am very grateful for EasyDNS being a sponsor. And what's happenstance here, which is quite great, you're a customer.
I'm an actual customer.
And you love it.
I do.
So I'm going to check it
Reliable
out.
service. I've not gotten any freebies as a result of my endorsement yet.
But you know, it's important to note, you know, in a time where cancel culture exists and deplatforming and all sorts of other shit, having a secure source to have your web hosting
That won't judge you.
It's really important. And so thank you very much, EasyDNS, and we look forward to talking about your sponsorship more. So I hope everybody enjoyed this episode. I hope they found it informative, and certainly we had several people asked about the update. We want to be, especially in cases like this, careful because it has not gone to trial. And it's very important to protect people's rights to a fair trial. But, you know, as evidence will come out, we'll try and update on it and see and follow it because it's an important case. So thank you very much for the inquiries because this is a result of that. And Pillow Talk.
Pillow Talk. Can't believe we still have these. These are what? T-shirts soon.
They're great. Let's get another one.
Yeah, well,
let's get baseball hats.
We should. Folks.
Make Not on Record great again.
I like that. That's a lot of though. How are you going to fit that? We can do it.
Make Not on Record go to a 5th year.
Exactly. Folks, please like, comment, subscribe, and share. We count on this, and as does our sponsor now.
And I'm telling you, we are getting really great questions. Our clips that are posted on TikTok, commentary when our podcast drops, and commentary when it's ongoing. We read it all. We take the emails, and it's really, really helpful. Somebody just asked about a really good podcast on consent. And you know what? I thought about it for a moment. We talk about consent all the time and go, what does it mean that it's the subjective belief of the complainant? That person was right. We're going to do an episode on it.
For sure.
I really love the fact of this engagement with our viewers. So thank you very much. Please send us more of your interests.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.